keeping with our deeply religious theme, on the wedding of the kingdom, we saved some of the best wines till last with John Nichols.
There he is. Nobody works harder, writes more, inspires more than John Nichols. Please thank you, John.
The sun has come out. I do not know why Carolyn Dunning, the incredible organizer of this event with so many other people, didn't want to have it outside. It's been such a lovely day. But a huge, unyielding, crazy, out of control round of applause for the organizers of BobFest North. Fabulous. Look at this. That's right. They put together an incredible event. And so I know that we're not going to do it quite yet, but I want you to get ready and feel down in your pocket for those last few dollars that you have. Because, of course, as is typical with all BobFest things, we did it on spec, and so we're broke. And so whatever you can contribute will be much appreciated. We're gonna shake you down in a big way in a few minutes, though, so don't worry about that. I should get my remarks out here. I gotta just a sec here. Whoa, 14,000 votes from Waukesha County. And all of them are for Joanne Kloppenberg. I knew that was going to turn out okay. Hey, I don't really need a lot of notes to talk to you folks because I feel like I've come home. I am from here in a very real sense. When my grandmother got pregnant, it's not a thought I like to dwell on. When my grandmother was impregnated by my grandfather, I hope, they lived so far from anything that she had to take the train to Eau Claire to deliver her child. And it was in the first week of December 1927, and they got as far as Owen, where my grandmother went into labor, and so they had to stop the train and take her off. Now it's lucky that I have a cousin or relative in every town in the state of Wisconsin. I'm a 7th generation Wisconsinite. We're not the most pleasant people, so they keep spreading us out further across the state. So there were Nicholses in Owen. And Grandma Nichols got off the train, hobbled down to a farmhouse, and my dad was born on December 8th, 1927 in Owen, Wisconsin. Unfortunately, Owen didn't have a doctor, so he was birthed by the veterinarian. But I will, because of that, forever claim residence in the North, or at least as far as Owen is. And I am always so glad and so excited to be back with the truest, most unyielding progressives in this state, the progressives of northern and western Wisconsin. always am glad to be here in the company of, you know, and this, I've said this for years, so this is nothing new. I've said this for years, but I've never meant it more now than as I say it this day. I am always glad to be in the company of my governor of Wisconsin, the guy who in 1998, when the Democratic Party was actually talking about giving up on the race against Tommy Thompson. Tommy Thompson had so much money, oh, we can't take him on. Tommy Thompson, he's so popular, even the black people in Milwaukee like him. Tommy Thompson, oh my God, Democrats love Tommy. There's nobody that will take on Tommy Thompson. And we looked around and we found one man with an ego large enough and with a heart large enough and with a progressive spirit long enough and strong enough to take on Tommy Thompson. He rebuilt the progressive movement in this state. He rebuilt the Democratic Party. He renewed everything that we're about. Please give it up for Ed Garvey. That is my governor of Wisconsin from here until we swear in Russ Feingold next March. Or maybe April, depending on how the recall effort goes. Now also, when I come to the North, I am always reminded of my dad's old friend and old family friend, Frank Nichols, who was the longtime state representative from out in, he's from out of Abbotsford. And back in the days when Abbotsford elected Democrats. And can I please ask you to take Scott Suter back? But Frank Nichols, we came up here and gave him we thought he was gonna die 20 years ago, so we gave him some memorial thing back then. He's still around. But Frank Nichols was the best, and is the best rural progressive this state ever produced. That guy, he's just incredible. He told this story about when his mother would send him and his brother downtown in Abbotsford. And, you know, it's hard to find downtown Abbotsford. They'd go down with their red wagon because their family had fallen on hard times. They'd go down with their red wagon in 1933 to the village hall to pick up their relief food because they were on relief and they had to get some free food and some free goods to make ends meet. And of course, in the classic Abbotsford fashion, they made the poor people come and do it in public, right? You wanted to see who wasn't kind of wealthy enough to take care of themselves. And it was something Frank said that they tried to shame folks. But Frank's mother told him, you take that wagon down there and you hold your head high. Because Franklin Roosevelt wants you to be fed and to grow up strong and to tell those bastards what for. And you want to know what? Frank did. Frank got himself elected to the legislature, and there is an incredible story of when he came in that great 1958 wave of legislators that came in, and they took over the legislature. Frank's in a position of power, and one of the old Republican legislators, an old woman named Esther Lockhart, comes in and she says to these new young whippersnapper Democrats, first time they'd had control of the legislature, first time Democrats had controlled both houses of the legislature of Wisconsin since the 1850s, right? They'd never had, we were not a democratic state, my dear. And so they're in there, and these Republicans never thought that they were going to be swept out of office. And Esther Lockhart came in, and she said, well, you know, I understand you guys won, and I know I'm going to have to move my office to a smaller office, but I've got a couch that I really like, and I wonder if I could take my couch with me. And Frank and his little crew there said, Frank likes to say it wasn't him, leaned over the desk and said, Esther, where you're going, there's not going to be room for a couch. Now, I feel that we've lost some of the good spirit of our politics since those days of humanity and sort of, they always say, oh, back in the past we used to cooperate a lot. Hell, we didn't cooperate, we put them in a closet. But the thing I like best, the thing I always like when I think about Frank Nichols believed in government. He believed government was a good thing. And he gave a lot more than he ever got. But now Frank is in the last years of his life, and he's been suffering from some terrible health ailments. And he's finally getting a little bit back in his Medicare. And it's a funny thing. I know there's a lot of people that like to say that these debates about budgets, this Paul Ryan plan, that it's just politics. It's a debate about how we're going to balance our budget, how we're going to get this decimal over here, and how we're going to move those zeros over there, and how we're going to, 20 years from now, we've paid off all the insurance companies and made everybody on Wall Street richer than they've ever been. Maybe someday we'll balance the budget. Oh, it's all numbers. He says, I'm sorry. If Paul Ryan messes 1 penny of Frank Nichols' Medicare, I'm coming for him. And I got a feeling you're coming with me. Because if they mess with our Medicare, if they mess with our Medicaid, if they mess with our public schools, if they mess with our public services, if they mess with our labor rights, if they mess with our democracy, we're coming for them with our votes. And we are going to vote, and we are going to vote, and we are going to vote. And if they put a voter ID bill in our way, we're going to blast right through it. And we're going to get to those polling places, and we're going to vote every last one of them out of office. Every last one out of office. And I want Ed Garvey to know that was not a political statement. That was a moral statement. Morality demands such things, especially on Rapture Day. Now, since last some of us were together, I have been busy. I went to our capital in Madison. And often I go to our capital and it's just me. But some of my friends came. And we had some rallies out by the Capitol. And I was delighted to be at those rallies with some of the people that Scott Walker seems to think are useless. Snowplow drivers, for instance, and teachers. And we had a lot of our rallies out on the King Street entrance of the state capitol. I believe I'm seeing the nodding heads. Some of you were there. We went, yes, thank you very much. It's nice to stand there with a crowd, not alone. And the interesting thing is that we did it all right. We got the central casting stuff. You know, we had snow. It was very cold. We had women in Christmas sweaters. Even in February, I don't know, when does the Christmas sweater get retired? It's when the lights go down. Right? And I want to tell you, Nothing to dispel the cynicism of a New Yorker or a Washingtonian, like a woman in a Christmas sweater chanting an injury to one is an injury to all. We did it just about right, I'd say. I remember I was talking to Joel Greeno, who's a good farmer from out in Kendall one day. He was going to bring, a couple weeks before the tractors came, he was going to bring his tractor, but he said, I couldn't get it out of the ice. Like, it was stuck in the snow. And we're talking about all this stuff. And some woman came over and she leaned in next to me as I'm talking to Joel. And she was like a MATC technical college professor, very smart person. And she had the best line of the whole movement. She goes, I'm glad it started here. And you know, she was so right. Because we were really ready for this one, right? We knew how to, we fished through ice. We're good with snow. Most of us have dealt with lunkheads all of our lives, if we're teachers or whatever. But we also know our history. And that's what made us powerful. That's the people, I go to New York, I go to Washington, people always say, well, how come Wisconsin did so good? You know, we've been trying to, Michael Moore, when he came to the Capitol, he actually said this. He said, I don't know how many of you have seen Capitalism, A Love Story. This is Michael Moore's movie. It's a great movie. It's later tonight when you're old enough to drive home, I'd recommend renting it. But at the end of that movie, he's talking about all the bailouts, all the money that they took out of our pockets. And literally, they went right into our pockets and gave it to the biggest bankers in this country. And they said, after you have taken all the money out of this country, after you've shipped all of our jobs overseas, after you've laid us all off, here's a whole bunch of our money. That's what the bank bailout was. And Moore exposed all that. He had Marcy Kaptur, the congresswoman from Ohio, referring to it as an economic coup d'etat. But at the end of that movie, Michael Moore was standing on Wall Street outside one of the big banks, and he tried to do a citizen's arrest on the bankers. It's appropriate. But it was actually a very poignant scene, because he's standing there alone, and he turns to the camera and he says, I'm talking to you folks out there in the movie theaters, and I want to say something to you. I can't do this on my own for much longer. I've been making these movies, I've been talking about this stuff for a long time, but it's not working. They just stole all our money and we didn't do anything about it. We have not stood up and fought. We haven't battled them as they've taken away our rights. We haven't battled them as they've dismantled the New Deal and the Fair Deal and the Great Society, as they've come after every single thing that we valued in our lives. We have not fought back. And he said, you guys, you got to stand up. You have to do something. And it was actually very sad, because you're sitting there in the theater and you're like, well, I'm going to stand up, but then I'm driving home. And you're realizing that he was making an appeal. And when Michael Moore came to Madison, about 3 weeks into the struggle, he got up on stage in front of 50,000 people, and he talked about how frustrated he had been when they took all that money, when they did everything, and then he looked at him and he said, and nothing happened. Nobody fought back until now. And he looked out at Wisconsin. And so all these people say, why did it happen in Wisconsin? Why are you so special? What makes you so different? Is it the cheese? Is it the beer? Is it the snow? Is it Ed Garvey? Yes. And the thing is, we had those rallies out on King Street, that entrance to the Capitol. And when you stood there at the entrance, they had a little stage set up there. Actually, I was sort of horrified, because several weeks after some of the best rallies, Sarah Palin came and stood in the same place. Priests were brought in, the area was sanctified. It's back to normal, it's fine. But you'd stand there and you'd look out, and you'd look out at these tens of thousands of wonderful people who had come from all over this state. freezing weather, cold weather. And at the end of it, there was a statue of Hans Christian Heg. Hans Christian Heg. And he was a Norwegian immigrant who came to Wisconsin as a young man, and he was a radical abolitionist. He formed a group called the Wide Awakes. And it was a network of people from throughout the state. And this was, young woman here in the crowd, this was before they had the internet. And so they had to, the Wide Awakes, if you were a Wide Awake, you were somebody that when the word came that a fugitive slave had come into the state, you would ride off through your county like Paul Revere, waking people up and saying, we've got to go protect this African American who has fled the plantations of the South, and we have to protect this person from the fugitive slave catchers. And he led this group called the Wide Awakes. Do you know they never took fugitive slaves out of Wisconsin? If you got to Wisconsin, you were free. And when the Civil War began, Hans Christian Heg organized a unit of all Norwegian immigrant soldiers, and they took their orders in Norwegian because they said if an American-born commander said to retreat, they would not hear or understand the order. They would march into battle no matter what the threat, because they were fighting to end slavery, and you never back down in a fight to end slavery. And they organized boys from Chippewa County and from Eau Claire and Dunn and Polk and Barron and across this state. And they went down. And the great lie of history is to say, oh, it was a war to preserve the Union. Wisconsinites did not fight to preserve the Union. I can tell you, I've never met a Wisconsinite that was all excited about keeping Mississippi in the game. Wisconsinites fought to end the sin of human bondage and to free the slaves and to change this country fundamentally. We fought to lead this country to a higher ground. And those men who came back from the Civil War, they taught their children and their grandchildren that this state made mighty sacrifices in the cause of justice. And one little boy, growing up in rural Primrose Township, he lost his dad at the age of 10. He was taken in by the Civil War vets, and they would tell him the stories of going into battle with a live eagle, a trained eagle named Old Abe. And as they got the order to charge, they would release this eagle to fly toward the Confederates, screeching in their faces, so terrify the Confederates that they could run in and take them down. He grew up on all these stories, and he was so filled with this passion, so filled with this belief that Wisconsinites alone were the most courageous, the bravest leaders for justice and for what was right in this country. And Robert M. La Follette, at the age of 18, he saddled up a buckboard wagon and he came down to Madison, and he heard Edward Ryan, the great Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court, say there's looming up a threat that is greater than any military threat to this country. Corporations are aggregating their power to move not merely in the economic sphere, but in the political sphere. And if they succeed, we will be left to ask, perhaps not in my time, but yours, which shall rule, wealth or man? Who shall fill the stations of public service, free and honorable men and women, or the feudal serfs of corporate capital? And La Follette heard that speech, and he committed his life to answering that question, that human beings would rule this land, not corporations, that the people would have the power, not the elites, that democracy would be our privilege, our right, and our demand. You know, La Follette ran for governor. They voted La Follette out of office because when they wanted to pass a law in Wisconsin that said that every order, every ballot, everything, it was a voter ID bill, so to speak, said they ought to have everything in English because there were too many Germans and Norwegians. Now, I might agree with that point, but as an Irishman, would you, Ed? Yes. But there were too many, the Germans kept talking in their own language, and so they wanted to make everything in English. You couldn't vote, you couldn't run for office unless you could speak English. La Follette opposed him, and he got voted out of office. He got so furious at the money power and the hatreds and the discriminations and the crudeness of those who held power that he decided to run for governor of this state. He ran once and he got beat. It's a good lesson here. He ran second time, he got beat. He came back a third time in 1900, the dawn of a new century, and he was elected governor of Wisconsin, and he rolled in the progressive era, not just to this state, but to this nation. They passed the first laws to protect women in the workplace, to protect children in the workplace, to protect workers in the workplace. They protected the farmers. They built an insurance program. They did workers' compensation. Every single law that the New Deal did started first in the state of Wisconsin under Robert La Follette and the Progressives. It's hardwired into us. This is who we are. No matter what the power that we are fighting against is, we know that we are stronger. We know that we are better. You know, it's funny. People out east, they don't believe this. They actually think it's a joke. But I've tried it 100 times in Wisconsin. It's never failed. I believe Wisconsin is the greatest state in this country and that everything good about America comes from Wisconsin. So I am damn glad this fight started here. If they had started it anywhere else, it wouldn't have gone the way it did, but they started it in Wisconsin and we were ready for them. And on those first days, you know, all the big pundits, all the big political folks, they said, he's a Republican governor, got a Republican legislature. There's no way to stop him. You can't stop he that is Scott Walker. Because a guy named Scott, how can you stop that? Ask Scott Fitzgerald. So, it's so overwhelming. And you know what? It's the truth. A lot of politicians, a lot of labor folks, top labor folks, they didn't know what to do. But on that day after Walker announced his plan, 50 University of Wisconsin graduate students, members of the Teaching Assistants Association, went out in front of the UW Student Union with handmade signs, and they said, "This bill shall not pass." 50 young people didn't know that they were supposed to be cynical. Oh, and on that following Monday, they cut out hearts. It was so cute. 1,000 of them marched up to the Capitol. Governor Walker, don't break our hearts. As if he cared. But a lot of other people saw him, and on each day, a few more people came. I was there on that Tuesday night rally, first big rally outside the Capitol. That woman's nodding. It was snowing a little bit. It was cold. There was a guy walking in front of me. He had a sign. I thought Cairo would be warmer. Because Governor Walker, you know, he He announced his plan one day after Hosni Mubarak stepped down. I have a feeling he said, whoa, the world's one dictator short. Better take a shot at that. But what he didn't recognize is that we took a lesson, because we learned from ourselves, but we also learned from the world. We took a lesson from Egypt. 18 days. Okay, we got not just one rally, we keep coming. So on that, I remember that rally, and that Tuesday night, we were out there, it was cold, and nobody knew what to say. Nobody from Washington had sent us out the talking points. So we talked like Wisconsinites. And we said, because Wisconsinites are good at saying, this is wrong. It's wrong to take away the rights of unions. It's wrong to restructure state government so that you can sell off our public properties to the lowest bidder who happens to be your campaign contributor. And it is wrong to restructure state government so you can take apart Badger Care and senior care. That is wrong. And that next day, you know who else decided it was wrong? Madison Teachers Incorporated, the teachers in Madison. And they decided they were going to take an in-service day and do some teaching at the Capitol. And you know, other teachers from around this state decided they too were going to try and educate some legislators. And that day, as I drove up to the Capitol in Madison, there was all this, you know, it's not hard to get to the Capitol at 10 in the morning. And yet, the street was hard to drive in. You couldn't pass the street easily. And I was like, what? Why am I being delayed on my way, in my motor car, on my way to my Capitol? And what is amiss? And as I got closer to the Capitol, I saw 2,000 students from East High School. That school was canceled. Those are young people that were supposed to be so disengaged, so uncaring, so disconnected. They just wanted to go play their Game Boys. No, they came that day to the high school parking lot and they marched 2,000 strong for 3 miles up the main drag of Madison to stand with their teachers in solidarity for their future, for the future of this state, and for the future of this country. That's solidarity. And every day they kept coming more and more until these crowds were so overwhelming. And then they got really scared because power doesn't like people. Power to the people, yeah, that's cool, but the people with power, ooh. And so they decided to rush through their bill, and they passed their bill. Kathleen told you about it. Wasn't she great, by the way? So they passed their bill. And then the New York Times, because they know everything, they're in New York. After the assembly passed it, the New York Times said the fight in Wisconsin is over. All done, it's all finished. This fight is done, we don't have a chance. And you know, just please, peasants, back to wherever you, whatever hovel you may live in. And it's clear, we knew what had happened. But on that Saturday morning the next day after the New York Times said the struggle was over, my daughter Whitman and I decided to go down about 4 miles south of Madison to a parking lot down there by our convention center. And Tony Schultz was there. And Joel Greeno from Kendall was there, and about 50 or 60 or 70 of their farmer friends from around Wisconsin. They had brought their tractors. And of course the struggle was over. The New York Times had pronounced us finished. And yet, farmers, they're bullheaded people. And they decided to have the tractorcade anyway. So Whitman and I got on that tractor, the front trailer there, and we headed out, and Joel Greeno from Family Farm Defenders said, let's roll. And we rolled up toward the Capitol, and as we went through the streets, we saw a couple kids. There were like 5 kids. They had a little sign that said, thank you, farmers. As we kept rolling along, got a little closer, and there's about a couple hundred people. Big banner, thank you, farmers. And then cars started coming along. Tractors don't drive that fast. Cars started coming along, and the farmers were having hard times getting through the lights. And the cars slowed down to parallel all these tractors and to move along with them. And it took us several weeks, but we even figured out that wasn't actually the joke. No, I said it had taken us several weeks, but we actually had figured out how to honk on our horns. This is what democracy looks like. Beep, 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 beep. And so here are all these tractors with all these cars. Beep, 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 beep. And we went rolling up there toward the Capitol on the day after the New York Times had declared this struggle was over. And we rolled into that square, that beautiful square in the center of Madison. And we were greeted by 150,000 people who do not read the New York Times. 150,000 Wisconsinites who said, this fight is not over. This fight has only begun. And I want to tell you something. That was the day I knew that no matter what Scott Walker does, no matter what Scott Fitzgerald does, no matter what the Waukesha County clerk does, no matter what they do, we are going to win this fight. We won the Civil War. We won the fight against economic royalty, and we are going to win this fight in Wisconsin. We are going to win this fight for us, and we are going to win this fight for America. We are going to win. We are going to win. We are going to recall 6 state senators. We are going to tell them, if you vote with Scott Walker, we vote you out. And then we're going to turn around and we're going to recall Scott Walker. And we are going to fill Herb Kohl's Senate seat with a progressive. And we are going to say to Paul Ryan and to Sean Duffy, if you like the private sector so much, we're sending you back to the private sector. We are going to do it to save Medicare and Medicaid. We are going to do it to save our local services. We are going to do it to save our public schools and our teachers. We are going to do it to renew our democracy, because Robert M. La Follette said, democracy is a life. And I want to tell you, folks, I want to tell you this with all my heart. He was right. Democracy is not a word. It is a life. And we have proven over the last 3 months, as we have prevented Scott Walker and the Republicans in the legislature from advancing their agenda, they have not gotten one bit of that anti-labor agenda implemented. And it's not just because of state senators or judges. It's because of you, because you were there, because of these crowds. But we are going to say, I want to tell you this with all of my heart. I know now what La Follette meant when he said democracy is a life. Because democracy isn't something that happens on election day. It's what happens after election day when we go to hold them to account. We have realized every dream and every promise of those kids who went and fought in the Civil War. We have realized every vision of Robert M. La Follette. Democracy is a life, and Wisconsin, we are living it all the way until that promise is fully realized. Economic and social justice, peace, democracy, a fully realized promise, and a future for our children that is so much better than what we have known. We do not have to go backwards. Our slogan is forward. Solidarity!